Hello, Advanced Algebra 2, 4th and 5th hour. This should be Monday the 20th. Okay, now just a little tidy up here. I'm doing my best to give you feedback on your homework when you turn those pictures in. So continue to get those in as soon as you can. I'm going to go ahead and make this week again. Your deadline's going to be Saturday. So you have time, but the more you get them done, and the easier it is for me not to lose track of them and give you feedback on how you're doing on those. And some of you have seen how I can mark on them and send you back some corrections. Okay, so just keep doing that. All right, so today we're going to kind of revisit a little geometry lesson on special right triangles, the 30, 60, 90, and the 45, 45, 90. Now this is something that this is kind of really in preparation for your next year's math class on how you'll work these problems. You might remember these from geometry, and in geometry maybe you did them as x, 2x, and x square root of 3 on your 30, 60, 90 triangle. And on your 45, 45, 90 triangle you did them x, x, x square root of 2. So you might remember that setup from last year in geometry. Now when you go on to next year's class, they'll just take away those x's and they'll just use 1, 2, and square root of 3. And 1, 1, square root of 2. So that's how we're going to do them today, just to kind of get you ready for your next math class. And we're going to look at some problems today where I want you to be able to do them without a calculator. Okay? But to do that, you have to know the layout of these two triangles. So this might be a case where you might want to make a little flashcard up with a blank 30, 60, 90 on the front without the sides on it, and on the back put the correct sides on it. And just kind of, quiz yourself on the layout of the 30, 60, 90. Now what you got to remember here is opposite of the 30 is the 1. Opposite of the 60 is actually let's go back. Opposite of 30 is a 1. Opposite of 90 is where your 2 goes. Opposite of 60 is your square root of 3. Okay, so if you can remember that square root of 3 is opposite of your 60 is the big one on the 30, 60, 90. And then on the 45, 45, 90, maybe one thing you remember about from geometry, if two angles are the same, then the sides opposite of them have to be the same. So those two sides both get labeled 1, and your hypotenuse then is a square root of 2. And that square root of 2 goes on the hypotenuse in a 45, 45, 90. Okay, so we're going to see here how we put these to work. Okay, there we go. Okay, so problem number 1. So what you want to do today is really recognize what your angle is. And anytime this is a 30, a 60, or a 45, then that's a special angle. Okay? And we need to be able to, these are the ones we need to be able to do without a calculator. Now we would start them off just like we did last week. We would figure out, we got a 4 here and we got an x here. Well, what are we dealing with? Well, the 4 is opposite of your 30 and the x is on the hypotenuse. So just like from last week, you would say, well, that means I have a sine of 30. This is so, opposite and hypotenuse is so. Sine of 30 is 4 over x. But now you got to realize with the sine of 30, then we can use our layout for our 30, 60, 90. And you would say, well, on the 30, 60, 90, what's opposite over hypotenuse on a 30, 60, 90? It's 1 over 2. So the sine of 30 is 1/2 equals 4 over x, and then we just cross multiply. So we would cross multiply, get x, cross the other direction, get 8, and we get x equals 8. And you can see we should be able to do that without a calculator if we can figure out the sine of 30 from that triangle. So it's important for you to know this layout of this 30, 60, 90 triangle. Okay? So now let's take a look now at number 2. Okay, so on number 2, again, what you want to notice right off the bat is this one of our special angles? Is it a 30, a 60, or a 45? No, it is not. Okay, so what's that tell me? That means we'll call it, we go old school on it. We still would say, hey, that's an opposite. This is an adjacent, because we did not have the hypotenuse. Remember last week we would have scribbled out that hypotenuse. Well, what deals with opposite O and adjacent A? TOA. So we go old school on it. We would say, okay, this means that the tangent of 70 equals 9 opposite 9 over adjacent x. And because this is not a 30, 60, or 45, then we will use our calculator. Okay, we will go ahead and cross multiply. Get x times the tangent of 70 equals 9. Then we can divide by that tangent of 70. And we see what we need to punch in our calculator now. 90 divided by the tangent, that's a 70. Not 90. 9 divided by the tangent of 70. And I got 3.3. Okay, so you got to kind of do, you have to recognize that your angle is 70 degrees. It's not a 30, 60, or 45. So you do it old school method, okay, or last week's method. But if it's a 30, 60, or 45, let's take a look at number 3. If it's a 30, a 60, or a 45, like number 3 is, then we need to use the layout of our 45, 45, 90. We would still look at this and we would say, what are we dealing with? The 5, we got a 5 rad 2 here. Well, that's a hypotenuse. The x is right next door. Remember, way over here is opposite. We don't have anything, we cross that out. We would say we're using adjacent and hypotenuse. What is that? That's ca. So we would say cosine of our angle 45 equals adjacent x over hypotenuse 5 rad 2. Now that's exactly the same as what you did last week. Here's the new part. Since this is a 45, now you're going to look and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to go over here. What is the cosine of the 45? Well, I've got two 45s here, but notice cosine deals with the adjacent. Both of them have a 1 that is adjacent to it. So it doesn't matter which one of those 45s you pick, the adjacent would be 1 and the hypotenuse would be square root of 2. So my cosine of 45, the adjacent would be a 1, the hypotenuse would be a square root of 2. And we set that equal to x over 5 square root of 2. And now we're off and running cross multiplying here. We would cross multiply and get x times the square root of 2 equals 5 square root of 2. Don't let the square root of 2 scare you. You're multiplying by that square root of 2 right there. So how you get rid of it? Divide by it. And then anytime you have the same thing in the numerator and denominator of a fraction, you get to cancel. So then we just get an x over here. We would also get to cancel on the right. And we just get an answer of 5. Okay. So I guess the big thing today is, before tomorrow, make sure you kind of have a good understanding of the layout of that 30, 60, 90 and that 45, 45, 90. Okay. And you might want to have these notes handy for the layouts of those two triangles when you do your homework. Now also remember, I'm going to go back here and lose my drawing, but remember, whenever the angle is not a 30, 60, or a 45, then you go old school. Then it's a last week problem, okay? Then you will use your calculator. But if it is a 30, 60, or 45, I want you to try to do them without a calculator. Okay? So get your homework done, submit your picture, stay on top of things this week. You guys are doing a great job. Hope everything's going okay at home for you. Everything's good here with me. Okay? I'll see you tomorrow.